everyone, I'm attorney Aiden Durham with 180 Law Co. in Colorado. Welcome back to All Up in Your Business. In my last video, I did something a little different. I let you guys all up into my business, and we talked about how much money I made in 2022. Well, we're gonna continue with this theme this week and talk about why I recently made a few changes to my business. Up until recently, my law practice business and my kind of YouTuber business were all housed under one entity. But then I decided to break them off and split them into two separate entities. And so this week, we're gonna kind of talk it out, talk it through, talk about why I did that. Before we get into all that stuff though, if you are new here, welcome. Please subscribe if you haven't already. You can click that little bell so you get notified anytime I post a new video, and you can check the description for links to additional information and resources. I would also love it if you would follow me on Instagram. And while I am a lawyer, I am not your lawyer. The stuff I talk about in all of my videos should not be taken as a substitute for actual legal advice. If you need help with any legal issue, you should consult with a lawyer who's licensed in your state. All right, so in my line of work, working with businesses and small business owners, I have a lot of consultations and conversations with my clients that are around like, I want to start a few different businesses. I have a couple of different ideas, different things I want to start doing. I'm not sure if I should do all of them in one entity. Should I form one LLC to do all of it? Is it better to have multiple LLCs for each different business? And really, there's no one correct answer to a question like that. Every situation is different and every answer is going to be different. Usually, my general response, my general thought process with this is if the two businesses or multiple businesses, if they're all closely related, if they're kind of intertwined with one another, and or if they're all kind of like part-time things where you're not making significant money from one in particular, if it's all kind of side jobs and side money from all of them, then it's usually easiest and makes more sense to just do everything under one entity. And so in me talking about this and going through why I decided to separate my law practice from my YouTuber business, again, keep in mind that I'm not saying this is how everyone should be doing it. This is just really a fun little anecdote, a little example, so you can kind of see my thought process behind it and the things that I took under consideration, and hopefully that will be helpful for some of you. So like I said, until recently, my business, everything was under one entity. I started my law practice, about 10 years ago, and I formed an LLC for my law practice. And shortly thereafter, I started this YouTube channel. I didn't really consider YouTube, my YouTube channel, to be a business in itself. I wasn't generating any income from it. And really, I didn't have any intent or plan to do so. Frankly, I didn't think enough people would watch my videos to actually make any money off of the YouTube channel. Ultimately, this, in the beginning at least, was a marketing tool for my business. If I got up here, talked about business stuff, intellectual property stuff, hopefully some of you would watch it and then decide to contact me and hire me for more legal help. So it was a marketing tool, not its own like separate income generating thing that I had initially planned. Then over time, I actually started to get more and more views. I started making a little bit of money off of YouTube. At first, it was just like a few hundred a year, maybe eventually a few thousand per year, but like nothing significant really by any means. Then it really kind of started to grow even more. It started getting to the point where I was making a few thousand per month, really more of like a full-time income almost that I was making just from YouTube. And in that sense, YouTube did kind of start becoming its own business. It was its own money generating thing, even though ultimately it was still a marketing tool for my law practice. Even then though, even with the growth of my channel, I still didn't bother separating it or creating a separate entity for YouTube. I didn't really see any benefit to doing so. I didn't see any real necessity to it. I didn't want the hassle of now I have a second entity to deal with. And again, ultimately, it still all boiled down to my law practice. So I saw it as so closely related. They're one and the same. So why would I bother starting a separate business for YouTube? Sometimes when I'm working with clients and stuff, sometimes I will recommend having separate entities for separate businesses because we don't want shared liability between the two businesses. Let's say I'm a lawyer and maybe a dog walker. If something comes up with my dog walking business, some liability arises, I want to make sure my law practice isn't going to be subject to that liability, and vice versa. I don't want them to share liability with each other. I want to keep them separate and separated from each other's liability, exposure, and the potential things that could come up. But in my actual situation, I'm not a dog walker. With YouTube, the liability exposure, the risk of liability is pretty small, especially compared to like a dog walking business where I'm out there in the world, I'm dealing with other people's animals, I'm dealing with animals that could potentially hurt people. There's a bit more exposure to liability. Not so much with making YouTube videos. I guess there is some risk of liability, but it's pretty minimal. So I wasn't so concerned about that I need to separate the liability from YouTube from my law practice. And again, like I said, ultimately all boiled down to my law practice. YouTube was a tool for generating income in my law practice. The law practice is the main thing in the end. Then I started doing some like brand partnerships and affiliate marketing, making some additional money off of that. So kind of related to my YouTube channel, but still income outside of it. So like, yeah, okay, this is starting to become like its own animal, its own separate thing. This YouTube thing really is starting to grow into something kind of separate and distinct from my law practice, my law business. And then the thing that really kind of turned the tides for me, I launched my course Brandish, my DIY trademark course, where I teach people how to submit a trademark application and get a trademark registration without having to work with a lawyer. And in my situation, in my circumstances in particular, this is the main reason that I decided to create a separate business, create a separate entity. Now, this is kind of just a special issue with lawyers and maybe some other professions. This probably doesn't apply to most of you, but we have to be really careful that people don't think they're our clients if they're not really our clients. I can't have people thinking that I'm their lawyer if I'm not actually their lawyer. That's why you guys hear me do that legal disclaimer in the beginning of each video saying I'm a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. I need to make it clear to all of you just that by virtue of watching my videos, that is not establishing an attorney-client relationship between us. I'm not becoming your lawyer. Because if I am your lawyer, now I have a bunch of responsibilities to you. I have responsibilities to my clients ethically and otherwise, and I could potentially get in a lot of trouble if I don't honor those responsibilities. So with Brandish, my course, I need to make it really clear that when someone purchases my course, if they sign up for Brandish, that does not mean that they are now working with me as their lawyer. We are not establishing an attorney-client relationship just because someone purchases my trademark course. So that really was the main driving force behind starting this separate entity, starting a separate business for my law practice and everything not law practice related. I formed this new entity so to help make it clear that you're not buying anything from 180 Law Co. You're buying something from this new separate entity that's not 180 Law Co. And since I was going to do that anyway, since I was going to set up this separate entity for Brandish anyway, I figured I might as well move all my non-lawyer stuff to that new business. Not so much for like the liability sharing reasons that I talked about, really more for like accounting and bookkeeping purposes. I had started to make real significant money from YouTube and from brand partnerships and stuff. They were really becoming more like full-time income, and it really had kind of turned into its own separate business anyway. And so this way, by having them separate, by having separate books, separate accounting records, I can see really the performance of my law practice, my income, my expenses, everything related to my law practice separate from all the other income expenses, and I can better kind of assess how my two businesses are performing. And this this way, it's just kind of more clear. It's just easier. Like when I send an invoice to a brand partner, if they've sponsored a video, I send them an invoice for my, fee. And now it has my new company's logo on the top of the invoice rather than it having my 180 Law Co logo. By the way, shout out to Brand Crowd for that. I didn't really need anything fancy. I don't need really a fancy logo for this new company. I just wanted something kind of basic that I could stick on an invoice. So I used Brand Crowd to create this new logo. I'm going to touch more on that next week though. So that kind of, I think, adequately describes why I started this new separate business, separated my law practice business from my kind of YouTuber business. A question that often comes up again, when we're talking about creating new entities, separating businesses and stuff, did I start a holding company? No, I didn't. No, I didn't start a holding company. Almost inevitably, when the question of 2 or more entities comes up, the follow-up question is almost always going to be, well, should I start a holding company too? Most of the time when I'm consulting with a client or something, most of the time my response to this is to ask a question back, to ask, well, why would you? What benefit are you looking to get from having a holding company? And if they don't have a clear answer to that, if they don't already know, like, what is this benefit that I'm going to get from the holding company, or if their answer is something like, well, I don't know, everyone just says you should start a holding company, then the answer is almost always, my response is almost always, no, don't start a holding company. Don't bother. I wasn't going to get any benefit from having a holding company that would then own my 2 subsidiary or my child companies. Really, it was just going to be added hassle. It was going to be one more entity, yet now a 3rd entity that I'd have to deal with, pay filing fees for, do accounting and bookkeeping, blah, blah, blah stuff for. There was no benefit. And a lot of the time, there's really no significant benefit to having a holding company in a situation like mine, or where, maybe we have a few different kind of businesses or entities operating. In my instance in particular, there was no benefit to setting up a 3rd company, having this holding company. So no, I didn't bother doing that. Plus, I think it could potentially cause some issues with my law practice. I don't know if this is exactly correct, but there could be like some issues with another entity owning my law practice business. There might be some like ethical stuff that comes up with that. So I didn't know if I'd really be allowed to do that anyway, and I didn't want to bother researching it, and it wouldn't do me any good. So no. So that's kind of it. The main reason I separated my business, really the main reason, was to make it clear that when people signed up for my online course, that they're not now engaging my professional lawyer services or creating an attorney-client relationship, but also because my YouTuber related business plus my online course, all of that was really turning into its own actual separate business and generating its own legitimate income. And so just kind of for financial reasons, it made sense to have them be separate so I could look at them as separate businesses. I hope that's helpful for some of you. If you learned a thing or two, go ahead and give me a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe, click that little bell so you get notified anytime I post a new video. Don't forget to go follow me on Instagram as well. And check the description for links to additional information and resources. If you happen to miss that video from last week and you want to get a little nosy and find out how much money I made last year, you can check it out right here. I'll meet you over there. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Aiden Durham, and I'll see you next time.